We got a lot to cover here, guys, so bear with me. With a franchise as big as Sonic's, there's no doubt going to be a lot of games, and therefore, a lot of final bosses to fight. Now, I've done a similar video like this to commemorate the release of Sonic Superstars, but I'm going to do a video. This specific version of the video will be to commemorate the release of Sonic X Shadow Generations. Now, this series has its fair share of types of boss fights you gotta fight, like side-scrollings, going to space, fighting literal gods and demons, Eggman. The list can be anything. Then that's what I like about it. And we're going to do something that I should have done on the previous list. The previous list had 19 bosses. Whether or not that was good is up to the public to see. But this time, we're tripling it. Because now, we're doing 60 bosses. I know, that seems like a lot. But I just wanted to do that because I wanted to go more in depth. And now with that out of the way, let's get into some of the conditions of this list. Number one, I dug deep for this one. Expect to see bosses from games like Sonic Chronicles, Sonic Neo Pocket Adventure, all that. I'm also including Sonic 4 Episode 1 and 2. No excuses, I'm including those because they deserve to be in this video. And also, every single handheld boss will be on this list. So, Labyrinth, Pocket Adventure, Advanced Series, Rush Series, they're gonna be there. They're all gonna be in this video. Number two, for certain games, I'm using certain ways to control my character. For example, with the Storybook series, I used like a control patch that allows me to play with this through my Steam Deck. And for Sonic Freeriders, for this thing, I decided to use Xenia with a freaking controller patch that removes the connect feature by the modder Raysound. So, big shout outs and a big thank you to them for doing this, for making this game playable again. So I don't want any purists of Sonic Freeriders to be like, oh, you should have used the motion controls and the Kinect. Nah, I ain't playing that. I ain't gonna play Sonic Freeriders with Kinect on the channel, because I'm gonna show y'all why. I'm trying to skip the freaking cutscene. Dude, I haven't even gone to the freaking title screen yet. Look! Number three, this list may be subject to change, so not every opinion might be final, but hey, if it's on the list, it's on the list. And if a boss that you like is slow on the list, tell me why you like it. Leave it in the description below, leave it in the comments. Tell me why you like it, and I'd be gladly to not take that away from you. If you like it, that's all you. You like it, that's totally good. And for the fourth one, I'm going to be ranking this based on S rank to F tier. TLDR, F being the worst, S being the best. So I will also be evaluating these bosses based on things like gameplay, music difficulty, design, cinematics, and all that stuff. Because that is what amazingness entails for these bosses, and if it's combined perfectly, then they're good. They're masterpieces. And so with that out of the way, let the journey of Sonic Final Boss Ranking commence!
You are in hell.
For this one, we're gonna need a bit of context. Long ago, Ix was the one who incited the construction of the Gizoids, highly advanced combat androids that warred against the Knuckles clan 4,000 years prior to the events of this game. But due to both him and the Nocturnus clan being the only survivors, they were imprisoned in the Twilight Cage for 4,000 years, and then Ix went mad, and then he allied with 4 alien species, and then during the events of the game, just dropped Angel Island on Metropolis. Nothing much, just stole the Master Emerald and dropped an entire island on a populated area. Just a regular Tuesday for him. And after you fight him for a second time on Nocturne, he sheds his battle armor and prepares himself to take on Super Sonic. But surely this fight would be incredible and epic, right? Right? Your eyes were not deceiving you, my friends. That is the entire fight. This is the final boss of Sonic Chronicles. All that you do in this fight, and I'm using that term very loosely, is that you tap the icons to block his only attack, which is Overload. And then you use Super Sonic and basically just do a glorified QuickTime event. And you defeat him in one turn! One turn! All it takes is one single turn! One singular turn of just tapping the freaking skeleton on the screen! And to make matters worse, the game just ends on a cliffhanger! There were plans for a sequel, but that it was never resolved thanks to suing Sega, EA, and BioWare, therefore rendering Chronicles 2 and Chronicles in general to not be canon. And now we'll never know. I had to play hours upon hours upon hours of this game just to fight this excuse of a final boss. You dropped an entire island, and I know it's meant to be cinematic in Sonic's point of view, but come on! A challenge would be nice. Even Bowser from Super Mario Galaxy 2 has a far more intimidating final boss than this. And this is why Twilight X is the worst Sonic final boss ever. In my own opinion, if you have anyone that's worse, sound off, because we're moving on. Now this next boss makes a complete 180 in terms of difficulty. And trust me, no, it's not for the better. Oh my god! The reason I put Black Dragon above X is because, at the very least, he's harder. Since Superstars has an extreme difficulty spike near the end of the game, especially in the last story. In this first phase, he shoots red and blue rocks, which you gotta hit the blue rocks to hit him, manifesting crystal paths, shooting black holes, using a gigantic spin attack, which don't really knock you over, but you need the rings, so yeah. For the second phase, he uses gigantic claw attacks, he just stops time, and then, instead of black holes in the 2D section, he shoots gigantic fireballs. The main problem I have with this boss fight is that it requires you to wait so many times, but you have to maintain your rings, and rings deplete while you wait. Come on, so that kind of just crosses over and doesn't mix well. Well, yes, there are rings that you can collect all over the stage, and Tails, Knuckles, and sometimes Trip can help you with the rings. But once you transition to a 2D section, you're trying to get the rings. They just fly off. The rings just fly off and you just lose them. The first phase, yes, I can do that one without much hassle. But the second phase is where things just go from bad to just downright wrong. But once you manage to get to the third phase, this third phase is just why? Why was the third phase like this? Why did I have so much trouble just trying to home into a freaking rock? Why do I need the precision of a god? After you somehow complete your next surgeon exam, you fly into him and finally defeat him. In conclusion, the lack of context clues, loose physics, strict timer, and poorly designed difficulty spike is why Black Dragon sits at number 59. If that's not enough to prove you, watch the finale of my Sonic Superstars playthrough. Then you'll know why. Oh boy, Sonic Blast. Assuming you get the emeralds, the fight starts you off by giving you 99 rings. And this can either go great or horribly wrong. In this fight, you have to attack the top half of his machine. this is easier said than done. Because of the game's atrocious hit detection, getting onto the freaking bottom platform, which means you have to align yourself to the most minute pixel of the hitbox to try to hit the top half. This is also thanks to, in no part, the game's clunky-ass physics. In Phase 2, both halves start moving at different speeds, which means you'll have to time your jumps perfectly, more often than not. Also, in this fight, I just find myself hitting myself over and over and over. Why am I keep hitting myself over in this fight? It should not be that hard. Thanks to the atrocious hit detection, the clunky physics, and they're all so broken that finishing this fight is a chore. Jesus Christ, this fight is not very good. In fact, it's like really bad. It's like atrociously bad. But at the very least, it's not as bad as Ix, because at the very least, you actually get to fight him through traditional means of gameplay. And that's something to be proud of. This is gonna be the first of our many encounters with this hunk of junk. And Sonic 4 Episodes 1 version, it's definitely not the best by any means. The first problem is the music. June, I love it when you shred that guitar, but them snares have got to go! You've been using them for the entire game, and it's gonna blow my head off! Second of all, this boss got a little bit too much HP. Now you can make the argument that final bosses need a lot of HP to be challenging, but I guess it could be a bit too much for my taste. And another problem is that once you hit the Death Egg robot, no matter how many times, it'll only register one hit, and it'll launch you way too far. Speaking of attacks, he will jump towards you, use his Fists of Doom, but if you manage to hit him enough times, he will activate his freaking Nutcracker Ballet routine, and then he'll proceed to whip out his attacks again along with floating balls, all while listening to the snare of doom. And if you somehow manage to get to the final hit, he's not done being evil yet, because he will try and land on a randomly allocated spot. And if you're too far from that spot, you will literally die and have to start the fight all over again. That is why I don't have anything else to say about this fight. I just think it sucks. Moving on to number 56. Quick disclaimer, setting this up was a nightmare. Funny thing, I was actually going to use the Java version of this mobile version, but then I discovered an enhanced Android port of this specific version of the game, so I can give you my thoughts on this fight. Well, it sucks! Not only because it's a very loose representation of the story, it's also a very tiring boss fight. After the first phase where you run away from the gigantic fists, what you have to do is avoid the missiles that it shoots, causing you to use the fist as a platform in order to attack Eggman. Now this is another case of physics being a crutch for you, because even when I press left and jump at the same time, someone just jumps in place! Look! I'm not pressing anything else! After you manage to hit him enough times, you have to go to another phase that has you avoiding his rockets. But then once you reach the end of the room, you'll have to use the fist as a platform in order to hit a switch, and then carefully platform yourself into Eggman. I have nothing else to say. This is jank. So, yeah. We're moving on. Yes. The game where even the EC CPUs perform like Ultron. This boss is actually the final minigame in story mode, and it happens because Void becomes too welled up in his emotions, causing him to transform into this form. Anyone can trigger the fight when they get all the precious stones, but the minigame itself is not very engaging. What you do in this fight is to wait for certain buttons in the arena while avoiding debris, lasers, shockwaves, and the tractor beam of doom. It actually doesn't matter who actually wins the minigame, since it just takes you to the finale anyway. And y'all thought the Death Egg Robots theme from Sonic 4 was bad? Listen to this music! I thought the Sonic Forces classic music was bad. I want to commit a freaking Piccolo and just rip my ears off. I don't want to listen to this again. I did put Void a little bit higher because he does get redeemed in the end, which is kind of nice. And also, it allowed me to beat Sonic Shuffle. Thankfully, I beat that. Any way I could, I finally beat that game. Anyway, on to number 54. We have another case of lack of indication for this one, folks. I know that this is like a pinball-esque game, but I'm including this one too. Just getting up to this freaking boss fight is a challenge in itself. Once you manage to get up there, is when poop really hits the fan. What you have to do is to press the button on the ship several times, but it doesn't really indicate properly on what you gotta do, because even if you think you've done the button pressing, there will be arms that will take you back to the start, and falling off the stage means you gotta climb it back up. To me, the worst thing about this fight is that there is no helpful indication on whether the arms or the wind things on the cockpit are up if you want to attack it. This was my biggest factor on why I put this boss in the F tier. Other than that, I guess the music is okay, but the physics can be pretty jank because it's a pinball game. Physics are meant to be kind of jank, and they cannot help you at all. All you have to do is hit the cockpit 10 times, but trying to get to the cockpit is an absolute nightmare. And if you somehow manage to hit him 10 times, you beat it, and then you get blessed with the options theme. Beautiful. Just beautiful. Don't have a lot to say. He just looks ridiculous. For this fight, you just have to jump on him while avoiding his bouncing blasts. And you can easily just spam down until he dies. But after you hit him 16 times, Eggman decides to use the power of DeviantArt to pull out his one-hit KO move, which also takes one hit to do. Other than the strangely generic-looking design, there's nothing else I can say about this fight. Dang, I don't really remember this game because it's unimpressive. Moving on. Here we have ourselves the poor man's Doomsday Zone. What you gotta do in this fight is push Eggman's rockets into this robot, which bears many similarities with the boss we'll look at later in this list. Now, boosting into the rockets sounds easy enough, right? Nah, fam. Nah. Most of the time, I find myself either missing the boss once I push the rocket, or I get knocked back by the rocket even if I push it. And I'm doing this while I'm trying to maintain my rings. Besides that, there's nothing else that this boss can do. At the very least, this fight is merciful with its design when compared to the Black Dragon. And we also have a remix of Sky Sanctuary Zone as the final boss thing. Rather odd, but okay then. Other than this boss being a nightmare to hit, this fight is not really impressive either. I actually put this fight above Pocket Adventure because at the very least, it's shorter, yet it's also not another memorable fight in the least. What you have to do is hit the glass that Robotnik is standing in, which allows you to get 2 hits. After you hit him 6 times, the electric walls will start to activate at random intervals, which can be quite painful. While I do think that the randomness of the electric walls can make this fight quite challenging, and a bit exciting at times, there's not really much that this fight really has to offer in terms of memorability. Well, I guess there's nothing else to talk about through this fight either. Guess that's it for the F tiers. Moving on to the D tiers. Is what I would say if it weren't for these two coming in at number 50. Now, I'm going to combine these two into one because they're both short and they're both hard. Starting off with Metal Sonic. Quick disclaimer, I absolutely suck at fighting games, and make fun of you all you want for whatever reason. But this doesn't take away from the fact that Metal Sonic in this game is hard as balls. He'll come at you hard and fast, and he will do the grind that deals 1/3 of your HP. All you have to do is try to drain the barriers of your opponent as quickly as possible, and then use whatever combo that you're accustomed to. I just think this one's the better of the two. Now on to the EMEC. Unlike Metal Sonic, who has a 30-second time limit, the EMEC has 15 seconds. While he's much easier to beat, if you somehow fail to beat him, you have to start over from the beginning. If I was just gonna include the EMEC, then this fight would be like lower on the list. But thankfully, me including Metal Sonic from this game actually lifted this fight a little bit higher. I mean, it's at the top of F, which isn't really saying much, but hey, it's better than X's position.
It's called the because every single thing in it is mid.
Now, we head into the D ranks. I'm gonna be quick with these ones as well because while they're better than the F tiers, they're also the boring and disappointing ones for reasons we're gonna get into. Starting with... And funny thing, this is actually the easiest fight in the game. Even for a game that takes away Sonic's speed, this fight actually starts you with dodging the bombs in the square arena that this fight takes place in. And once the boss drops down from the heavens, all you gotta do is spin dash into him at the right time. I know I put this guy in B tier because one, he's very easy, and also, all he does is the same attack over and over, depending on the phase. Even if phase 2, he just improves it to lasers that split once they reach the floor. And all you gotta do is keep spin dashing at the right moment. I guess the only thing that I kind of like is the music in this. But then again, it's not a very high bar to begin with. But, hey, I at least beat Sonic Labyrinth. That's something to be proud of, I guess. Word of advice, don't use Supersonic here. You're gonna have a bad time. While Sonic 4 Episode 2 might be a significant improvement over the first one, the Egg Heart is... You start off by making your way through circular platforms that are actually pretty hard to maneuver unless you know your combo moves. But another problem arises when you have to keep waiting for those things to get going, and you have to avoid the platforms from shocking you. And as I said before, I do applaud that this boss has an original design. And that's it. That's pretty much one of the only good things about this boss. And it's also one of the rare occurrences in the series where fighting a boss as Supersonic actually makes the fight harder. But as the fight goes on, Eggman will summon a black hole, which won't kill you, but it will reset where you start in the platformer section, therefore giving off a sense of urgency in having to maneuver the platforms. While still very repetitive, the music for the Egg Heart is actually an improvement over the previous one. It still doesn't make it good, but hey, baby steps. Much like the previous ones, I don't have a lot to say, but I also don't have a lot to hate. After you hit the bell that signifies the checkpoint, she'll run away in her minecart, and all you gotta do is hit her with your ring. Or you could just slam her with your ring. Word of advice, don't rush. You will have to time your shots or else you're gonna crash. To be honest, I don't have anything really negative or positive to say about it. This boss is very middle of the road, and also quite repetitive if you know what you're doing. Not that I despise it, it's just mid for me. Moving on. As the only proper boss fight in Shattered Crystal, as the previous ones were just races, he starts out by capturing your friends in a giant Pokeball, prompting Sonic to give chase. Overall, those chase segments are really easy, and as for the fight, it's also easy. He'll shoot out his rockets, lasers that you can tell the patterns, and his arms where you can homing attack. As the stage goes on, the terrain will get more precarious, but it kind of makes the fight easier rather than harder. And his attacks don't really change all that much. Other than that, there isn't a whole lot to say about this fight aside from being repetitive. So yeah, it's just a very boring finale to a very boring game. But we will get back to this slithery psychopath later in the list. For this one, I had to go a little technical with this Connect patch because one, I'm not using the actual Connect. Now, onto the race itself. You race against Metal Sonic in Final Factory's expert layout, but there aren't any items in this one, so it's all about skill. He will try to catch up to you, and will also take all the shortcuts in the track, but at the end of the day, it's also a very easy race / fight. I guess the only tricky thing to me is the layout. That's why they call it an expert layout after all. If I were to do this one with the Connect, it would have ended up a lot different on the list. But for this one, I'm keeping this at number 45, since we have other fights to cover. Oh man, the Riders series isn't doing too hot with their final bosses, aren't they? Well, what places this above Free Riders is, at the very least, the Babylon Guardian has a unique design, I guess? But why he's here is because of a couple of reasons. Because first off, there isn't any indication of a Guardian in the story, other than him guarding a magic carpet. Also, reaching him can be kinda tricky. While he does attack you in the later phases of this race, for me, I rarely even get to see those attacks. As being the only boss in Riders, he's very unfulfilling. And you don't even have to get first place! That's how pathetic he is! I guess the music is cool, and the way that it's actually a simulated room is unique. I do think it's a unique concept. Overall, I just think this fight is also not very fulfilling. Get back in that lamp, genie, because there are better genies in this series. Oh, nice. The game where Tails becomes Michael Bay. Word of advice? Don't use the spin dash here, because blood will grab you and throw you out the window. Fight's basically just a glorified snowball fight with bombs, because even if you try to fly, he will throw the bombs into your flight path. And I know that this fight is slower in pace, because this whole game is slower in pace, but not to the extent of Sonic Labyrinth. This is actually a bit more of an interesting fight, even if there's nothing really amazing or groundbreaking or horrible to say about it. He does grow more sporadic as the fight goes on, however, and he will grab you, forcing you to retreat. Oh yeah, I do have a joke I've been saving up for this bit. Tchaikovsky! As much as I love Generations as a game, I have to say that the time meter is not one of its strongest assets. And I'm gonna tell you what in just a moment, so sit tight. You fight the Eggman as both classic and modern Super Sonic through a time tunnel, dodging its attacks. This allows you to switch between both Sonics for different perspectives, even if you just have to attack the core as modern Sonic. All in the while, Tails and the rest of Sonic's friends shout out the most obvious commands that you have to do every single time it attacks you! Oh yeah, and reaching the time meter can be really strenuous. So you're just sitting there trying to collect brains, and then that looks like a homing shot! I guess if I have to pick out a good thing about this fight, is the music! I do like that whenever you switch from modern Sonic to classic Sonic has a more 8-bit feel, while modern Sonic has a more cinematic feel. Which is a nice detail. Makes the fight feel a bit more dynamic. And I know it's for Sonic's friends to be supportive to Sonic, and it's in their character. I get it. But can y'all not be too obvious with things? Come on! Let me fight it, for God's sake! And after you survive this onslaught with the Eggmen, along with Tails and the gang, they shoot out the gigantic ball of doom, and you have to press the bumpers to finish it off. And this only takes 3 hits for that to happen. And overall, this fight was kind of a letdown. And from a game such as Generations, I kind of expected more. Not that the rest of the game is bad or anything, it's just that I could have expected more from this final boss. I do hope that this gets rectified in the remaster. Hey look y'all, it's our first 3-in-1! This one is quite strange since you actually fight 3 bosses, so I'm merging all of them in this spot. I know I put this one above the time eater for its ingenuity, but it still doesn't make this fight any easier than it is. Especially in the first 2 phases, because the first phase, he just bounces, bro. He just bounces, just that thing, just a spring. Yeah, phase 2 gets a little bit tricky since you actually have to time his shots to your movement. He does bring out an electric phase, but overall, that phase is still easy. But the third phase is where things get a bit too ridiculous. In this final phase, you're stuck in a room with lasers coming in from each and every direction. But you also gotta look out for Eggman because you don't know which side of the room he's gonna pop out, all while dodging the freaking balls of doom. I actually don't think this phase is bad. It's just quite insane that there's so many things going on all at once. That's gonna drive me nuts. Other than this one phase, there's not really much to talk about. I guess that's an improvement. Okay, moving on to number 40. I'm sure this one's a gem. our next fight, we head to Little Planet to fight the boss of Metallic Madness Zone. And boy, is this fight a joke. Not X-bad, but still not amazing. Still better than most. I guess the only thing I can find difficult about it is the prelude to the fight. As sometimes I have a hard time getting over these freaking stupid platforms. But the fight itself is not amazing. But hey, I know this because they prioritize time travel aesthetics over actually difficult boss fights. Because all this man does is just use his gigantic cross machine to hit you with his pillars of doom. Ooh! Also, the music is strangely awesome. Specifically the Japanese/Europe versions. Other than that, I think that this fight was pretty easy, and as a final boss, may not be really satisfying in hindsight, but the time travel aesthetics do make up for it in some way. Okay, these next two are going to be pretty similar, so one will be quicker than the others. Starting off with the Egg Destroyer from Sonic Rivals. Now, I put the Egg Destroyer in this position because, one, it's absolutely chaotic and unhinged. The main thing you gotta do in this fight is to reach the guns of the Egg Destroyer, while also avoiding its defenses and Metal Sonic. I know that you're able to dodge those attacks, but I could just brute force my way through this fight! I guess the only hard thing I could say about it is that Metal Sonic can really mess you up, and the defenses are absolutely crazy. And even with a time limit, brute forcing your way through is absolutely the most viable option. And I know you can finish the stage and fall through the freaking boss as you finish it. I know, it's strange. Anyways, on to number 38. Much like the farmer, you can choose any character for this fight along with the ones from Rivals 1. So this fight happens as your partner character, Tails in my case, gets mind-controlled by the Ifrit as it gets released from the Chaotic Inferno, which looks an awful lot like Crisis City, to be honest. And this fight has a fall meter which serves as this time limit. And if you see a button show up, press it quickly! After you hit solid ground, Ifrit will decide to shoot fire from each side, which will allow you to hit him at the right time. And much like the previous fight, brute forcing is also ideal. I actually put the Ifrit above the Egg Destroyer because I just think the design actually looks kinda cool. This bird-like monster with horns and fire wings reminds me of Rodan from the Godzilla franchise, and as well as the Firebird from Fantasia 2000. That's a more obscure reference, but I'ma let that slide. Other than that, I just think that this fight is kind of forgettable, but not quite as bad as some of the previous entries on this list. Now we get to the fight with Eggman's insistence on using past attacks. While yes, this does use attacks from a boss we'll look at later on the list, it actually manages to not be a total ripoff of this boss, while still being quite similar in style. And yes, this fight happens after Eggman fakes his own death. Yes, this fight does the whole running across a straight path while avoiding this man's attacks in a predetermined pattern. To me, that's not really the biggest issue. The biggest issue to me is that this fight can be a little bit too easy if you know what you're doing. And you do attack him in a similar manner by climbing up his joints and hitting the cockpit. And all it takes for you to defeat him is 2 fully charged homing attacks, and you can easily beat him in under 2 minutes. While everything else in this fight fell a little short for me, we can all agree that the boss theme in this freaking fight is freaking amazing. Just listen, dude. This game's music had no right to be as good as it is, but I applaud you for it, Mr. Otani. Good job, Tomoya. Anyways, on to number 36. And now we reach the end of the D ranks with Emerald. I placed him here in number 36 because the setup to the fight is surprisingly emotional. And it's all because of Emerald's bonds with all the characters throughout the game, especially with characters like Sonic and Cream and Shadow. Why does the story get kind of slept on? But then Eggman decides to erase that bond to destroy the planet with the final egg blaster that he's been building up throughout the entire game. And surely all of this would build up to a truly emotional fight, right? Well, this fight is basically just like every other fight in this game. Only this time Emerald is cracked out like crazy because man is just on a high right now. Yeah, Emerald's attacks are actually his regular attacks just souped up to infinity. And you fight him just like you would with any other character. And the music, it's basically just the Death Egg music. No sad remixes or anything, just the regular Death Egg music. Which isn't a bad theme, but it could have been better. It could have had like something a bit more emotional. Like, come on. Like, we have I'm With You with Sonic Frontiers. Why couldn't this happen? Like, come on.
But for real, Frontiers came like, I don't know, 19 years after this game came out. But I'm being way too unfair here.
Despite the fight being a bit more basic, I placed it here because of the emotional setup. But despite those nitpicks, this fight is... it's okay, it's not bad. And with his surprise reveal in Sonic X Shadow Generations, Dark Beginnings, I can see a bright future for our favorite little Gizoid.
The sea.
Now we move on to the C ranks, which are the bosses that I just feel are, they're okay. They're not bad. Correction, I'm content with their existence. They may have their own flaws. They're good. They're okay. They're alright. We're gonna move on to number 35. Oh yeah, this game exists. Whatever, double trouble time, let's freaking go. For this fight, you actually start off as Sticks, dodging DT's rocks from above. After a while, a boomerang rock will appear, so you better use the rank to pop the rocks. And then DT uses its tail to attack you, which also allows you to use your homing attack on it by switching to either fire or ice mode. And after you land enough hits, you switch back to Sonic, and then you have to avoid DT biting you and dodging the fire/ice bombs. I actually thought that this fight was kind of difficult. It was my first time playing this game, but I did not expect this fight to be kind of difficult. And from a Sonic Boom game, that's saying something. But other than that, I don't really have anything else to say, even if I do think that this is the best of the Boom games. But I also like that this boss takes advantage of the two screens of the 3DS. Overall, while not amazing, I just think this fight's pretty okay. And its design is certainly unique. It's a fight that exists. Yeah, I get it, right? So Lyric is more crap. And talk about the Lyric fight from this game without being freak again! In this fight, Lyric summons his robots for you to fight, as well as attacking you with hammers, shockwaves, and in the later phases, the Super Laser Piss! After dodging this onslaught, he drops down and leaves himself open to a beatdown from you and your team, culminating in you hog-tying him. Then as each character, depending on the phase at hand, you enter a platforming segment where you have to retrieve the crystals you have collected throughout the game. They're a bit easy, but hey, it makes for more variety, I guess. This is actually kind of cool for me, but I know somebody's gonna argue about that. The setting is kind of foreboding, and even the music is not bad. I know that the 3DS 5 with Lyric actually uses the same song, but hey, it's okay even if the soundtrack is forgettable. Even if the fight may be kind of easy and the graphical fidelity is not up to par and it gets a bit more repetitive, but I just think this fight is okay. It was a decent end to a very, very, very trash game. Yeah, I actually think Lyric is an okay fight. Moving on. Knuckles! I finally get to talk about Knuckles' chaotics on the channel. And I have to say, it's okay. This fight actually takes place on the hub world entrance. I actually think that setting the fight on the freaking hub world where you go through the levels is actually kind of unique in a way. It's cool. This fight has you hit Metal's arms in the first two phases with your partner character. In my case, Mighty the Armadillo! In the second phase, he will try to crush you with his arm in the background. And in the third phase, he will use his Super Laser Piss! From either side of the arena. Much like Lost World's Egg Robo, hitting him fast enough can get him out of the way quickly. What also sets this fight apart is the freaking design of this guy. I just think he looks cool. I just think a lot of these bosses look pretty cool. They just don't get a really good fight off of it. Not saying that this fight is bad, but hey, it's a bit middle of the road, and the tether can be quite cumbersome for some people, but I actually use that to my advantage in this game, not just in this fight. And the music is kind of catchy too. It's cool. I like it. It's not bad. This boss is alright. A little middle of the road, but not bad. Nice. Back to the Nux Man. This is actually the first of 2 games with 2 different final bosses for certain conditions. For this one, you just have to play as Knuckles. In this fight, you take on Mecha Sonic on Sky Sanctuary, as this first phase is basically the same as how you fight Mecha Sonic as regular Sonic. And after you hit him enough times, that is when things get real. Now this fight is pretty tricky, so you gotta maintain your rings and your distance. What he'll do is fly from side to side to either swoop down to you, spin dash to you, or shoot energy balls, which will allow you to get some hits on him. But after you hit him for 6 times, he will shoot out fake rings that will damage you and give you the smallest window of opportunity, because just actually trying to hit him through that window is absolute pain. Just why? Why Mecha Sonic? And this fight actually uses the Doomsday Zone music, which I'm not gonna complain about. To be honest, I don't really have a lot of negatives for this one. I just think that there are better fights out there. Weren't expecting me to talk about something related to Dream Team now, were ya? And I know that this fight isn't really a fight per se, but despite that issue, I still think that this fight is actually good, even if he goes down in one little hit. But that's besides the point. For this fight, if you can call it that, you play as every character except for Tails, since he's busy taking care of the Dream Core with REM in her ball form. What you gotta do is maneuver through an Eggman-based obstacle course. With Sonic, you have to use his speed and boosting, and then you gotta move on to Rouge, which specializes in gliding. For Knuckles, you have to climb up arms, then you move on to Cream, who has treadmilling arms and flying segments, and then Amy, whose section eerily resembles Infinite's first fight in Forces, as this one is the longest phase in this level. While this lacks in more traditional terms for a boss fight, the sheer cinematic scale of it is actually why I put it this high so far. The types of fights that allow you to play as a lot of characters are actually one of my favorites in the series. And this one is one of those fights done right. And then Amy passes REM to Tails, only for Eggman to race the platform where the Dream Core is standing, and it's up to Sonic to get her there. This final section is mostly just life dashing and homing attacking enemies to get to the tower. A bit underwhelming, but I still think it's good. While I do like the transitions from character to character, as well as the constantly shifting level design, if this were an actual fight, then it would be a lot higher on this list. But other than that, I still think this fight is pretty good. I still love Dream Team as a game. It was definitely worth the $6.99 a month for the Apple Arcade. Oh no, I put the Forces fight above Sonic Dream Team.
Shut up!
Even if it borrows attacks from a certain boss we'll look at later in this list, I actually put it in there because it actually still tried to do something different. This fight starts you off as classic Sonic on a shifting platform, and then you have to deflect rocks onto Eggman. And you do all this while your friends support you from the background. It's alright guys, save up your energy. You don't need to spend it all in one place. After that easy phase, you have to do the Avatars phase next, because this one is the best phase in my own personal opinion. In this phase, Eggman uses finger missiles, summons robots, and slams his fist down, leaving himself open to attacks. Or you could just attack the cockpit for extra damage. As this phase goes on, Eggman will disassemble the arena for more challenge, but as long as you keep dodging correctly, you will succeed. But then the third phase kinda loses me, because it's basically NWA. To be fair, I also forgot to mention the music for this fight. The 3 phases are actually really awesome for a final boss fight. Like, this music for this final boss is genuinely really good. But then again, for a guy with 300 IQ, you would know better than to use previous machines that Sonic defeated in the past. All the phases have their ups and downs, but it's still a good fight. And this fight actually has a rocket attack that's available in the 3rd phase, which actually makes it a bit more unique than the others, so good on you, Eggman. And then you end the fight through the triple boost that you don't really have to press the square button for. I still did it anyway because I wanted to do it because it felt satisfying, okay? Overall, this fight may be flawed and rushed, much like the game itself, but it's still a decent fight nonetheless. Okay, this one's gonna be pretty short, so bear with me. And yes, I did put the 3DS version over the console version for this one. It will be the first time I'm doing this, but it certainly won't be the last. Now, for the obvious improvements over the console version, are that this version uses its own unique attacks rather than borrowing from a later boss. And while the console version was an auto runner, you actually have to hold down the R button in order to run so you can get close to Eggman. Overall, I just think that this fight is a bit more enjoyable in this version. His attacks do get a bit more similar as the fight goes on, but it's nothing to worry about. And also, this version of the fight has a voice line exclusive to this version of the game. Just listen.
Magnificent plan!
Other than that, I just have to talk about everything from the console version in this version, which I don't want to do again, so yeah. Let's just move on to number 28. That's right, another racing game on this list, and this time it's Team Sonic Racing. And much like Nightmare Eggman, this isn't an actual fight per se, but rather it's a race against Eggman and his monster machines set in Thunderdeck. Because this fight is actually just a race in Thunderdeck. And dang, I don't hear a lot of people talk about Thunderdeck's music in this game. Just listen to this. It's actually really good. While this was a bit easier when compared to other bosses, I still enjoyed this race for what it was. The track's design was difficult, and it encourages the player to choose whatever path is available. I just think that this race is fun. I just think it's a good race. There's nothing wrong with it. Also, please listen to Thunderdeck. It's really good. I know some of y'all were wondering where I was going to place the Advanced series on this list. For this fight, you play as Super Sonic, as you can clearly see, as you fight Eggman. On the moon! As you fly, you have to dodge his attacks because, while they don't do any real damage, they will knock you back. You also have to maintain your rings because, unlike in Superstars, they are in capsules that are broken with a boost. And the boost doesn't actually waste rings. He also uses his arms to shoot off chunks of the moon to attack you, and I think that's kinda cool. And the feel of the music is also really suspenseful as your rings keep lowering and lowering. It's a suspenseful theme, not gonna lie. Other than that, he's pretty spammy with his attacks and will constantly knock you back. And you have to time your boost to hit the cockpit just right because it's really hard to do. Again, I don't really have anything bad to say about this fight. There are just fights that I like better on this list. This is still a pretty decent fight nonetheless. So, yeah, let's go move on. Look who's also appearing in Sonic X Shadow Generations. Yeah, I did place Doom a little bit higher than the other bosses, because lore-wise, I think it's cool. It's cool lore-wise.
Even if the plot of Shadow the Hedgehog is kind of a mess, but who cares about that? Let's just get to the boss, okay?
In this fight, you have to attack Black Doom in the eye as he bombards you with debris, but you have to be really careful because if you get too close, Black Doom will teleport to a far-off area using Chaos Control. Using Chaos Spear is essential here, since you can use it to shoot the balloons that contain rings as you need them to maintain your super state, which can help in cheesing this guy. You can also use Chaos Blast in order to deal damage, but don't use Chaos Control here. It's pretty inconvenient to say the least. And also, if you manage to wait out 9 whole minutes in this fight, Eggman will come out of the shadows and tell Shadow that he actually lied about creating him and his grandpa was the one that created him, as the audience knows. He also tells him that he survived the events of Adventure 2 by being rescued by one of his robots. Me explaining it doesn't do this justice. Here's the clip by itself.
Shadow, can you hear me? This might be the last chance I have to speak to you, so what I said about having created you, it was all a lie. Everyone thought you died during that horrible incident, but I rescued you with one of my robots. You lost your memory, that's all. You really are the ultimate life form my grandfather created.
Well, an engaging final boss this is not. The lore in this fight makes up for it at the end.
Even if you have to wait for 9 whole minutes.
Yeah, I forgot to mention about I Am All of Me as a theme. Even though this actually replaced the song Who I Am by Magnify. Okay, that's enough trivia. Let's move on to number 25. Even if Unleashed is my favorite Sonic game ever made, I have to say that the Dark Gaia in this version isn't the best, in my own opinion. It doesn't make it a bad boss, but hear me out, okay? You start off as the Gaia Colossus as he slowly but surely moves towards Dark Gaia while slowly avoiding the boulders he throws. But also there is the Super Laser Pierce that you have to take damage even if you block it. When you eventually close in on him, it's QTE time! Yes, this fight gets held back by the excessive amounts of quick time events. But even that won't really hinder my enjoyment of this fight by that much, okay? It's still a cool fight. After that, you move on to Sonic's parts that give you insane timers, so you have to be extra quick. As the fight goes on, DG's attacks get faster and faster, so now you have to punch the boulders with the triggers. And Sonic's parts get more and more ridiculous. Gameplay-wise, it may not be perfect, but cinematic-wise, woo! So good. Once you manage to finish this first phase, Dark Gaia transforms rather terrifyingly into perfect Dark Gaia, and you into Supersonic. Cue the orchestrations! For a perfect Dark Gaia, you build up your health gauge with rings, which will allow you to fly into the shield. No, wait. Chip does that. Chip flies into the shield to fight Dark Gaia face to face while you take care of the tentacles. And you do this while a beautifully orchestrated remix of Endless Possibility plays in the background. Just listen. Just listen to this masterpiece. But Dark Gaia won't leave you off the hook yet, because he will hit you with rocks, as well as the Super Laser Pierce! Once you finish with the snakes, you enter QTE land again, which actually looks kind of awesome, yet they're kinda just there for the sake of pressure. Your eyes are not deceiving you. You really do have to press this button 60 times for this. Overall, this fight may not be perfect, as he is so aptly named, but it's still a really good fight. And I still love Unleashed no matter what. I bet some of you weren't even aware that Colors even had an exclusive boss for the DS version, let alone a secret final boss at that. This is accomplished by getting all the Chaos Emeralds from the special stages. But we're here to talk about the fight, so here's the fight. This fight has you as Supersonic ramming asteroids into NMW's arms while avoiding her arm swipes that span the length of the screens. And you have to avoid eye lasers and the purple energy thingy that will slow you down. After you knock out both of its arms, you fly straight into the eye while avoiding the rocks, slowdown energy, and the red knockback energy, and big laser eyes. And if you manage to get close enough, you have to position yourself perfectly to ram the eye. Yes, her attacks do become more relentless as the fight goes on, but I also find this one to be kind of an easy for a Supersonic fight. Yes, this fight is short, yet I also find it nostalgic because I actually did fight this boss when I was a kid. We also get a chip-tuned version of Reach for the Stars as the theme, so that's nice. Still think this fight would have been better in the console version, especially in Ultimate. That's a shame. C'est la vie. Let's move on to number 23. Here we are at the end of the C ranks, and we get to talk about Sonic Advance 3's final boss. For this one, you're actually partnered with Eggman. That's unique. Of course, this is accessed once you gather all the Chaos Emeralds, but that's besides the point. Much like a lot of bosses in this list, Gemerald's attacks will knock you back, or in some cases, freeze you solid. In order to attack Gemerald, you have to use Eggman as a bullet to open up his weak spot for Supersonic to boost into him. And this weakness actually stays open for how much you charge Eggman. What I like about this fight is that you have to use Eggman to your advantage rather than defeat him. And also, this background's real trippy. It's nice and psychedelic. Makes you feel like you're another dimension, man. The music for this fight is delightfully hectic for a fight like this. It's really good. I respect a lot of Final Boss's music, so I hold that to a pretty high standard. I guess the only thing holding it back, as well as the game itself, is the method for getting the emeralds in order to get into the fight, which is so unnecessarily complicated for this game. I guess that's pretty much a problem with the game itself. Overall, I just think this fight is nice. Nothing else to it.
Barry B. Benson.
So you see soda spilled on a sidewalk and you don't drink it?
Oh boy, now we get to the B ranks. Now these fights, I genuinely think are really good. The only thing holding them back is that they are not the A ranks. They're still good though. And on to number 22. Here we have another minigame-based final boss, and this time, it's superior compared to Void. Also, this is the only boss from Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, so take that what you will. This is also the last of the Dream Gear minigames and will consist of 6 sections, all of which progressively get harder as you go along. While collecting the ring requirements can seem simple, this is actually easier said than done in some regards. While the gameplay is simple when compared to the other final bosses on this list, much like other final bosses, the story of this fight is actually quite emotional. Much like Emerald, only this time the boss theme is actually acceptable, as Mirage Express just wants to be with the conductor, in the most aggressive way possible, but he just wants to be with the conductor. Just maintaining your ring counter is quite a challenge, and it was only my first time playing this game. Sonic's friends do help out by revealing that there is a Flicky inside the train, and after you do the 100 ring segment, Espiel will rescue the Flicky and Amy will destroy this thing once and for all, because nobody messes with her birthday party. And also, the conductor will say his last goodbye to the train. I'm like, dang. Like, I didn't know it was that emotional. We're going back to Sonic battle levels of emotional again, so like, come on, man. What's up with that? While this fight may be simple in terms of gameplay, the story really makes up for it. Even if this game is just an April Fool's joke. It's the best April Fool's joke ever made. Our highest ranking 8-bit boss on this list, because this boss is surprisingly tough, even if you use the tubes. This boss is unlocked when you get the Chaos Emeralds, and also, this is the very first boss in the series to apply this condition to a final boss. What you have to do in this fight is dodge this boss's attacks by using the tubes, as the attacks will kill you instantly since you don't have any rings. And if you're wondering, yes, for certain 8-bit entries, I did use the Master System version since the Game Gear's small screen did not prioritize the fights very well. For being as tough as it is, I find this fight to be pretty surprising. And it was also the very first game in the series where you had to get the Chaos Emeralds in order to fight a secret boss. While yes, you do spend the majority of this fight in the tubes and all that, which is kind of a drawback for some people, but as long as it keeps me safe, alright? Come on! I just think this fight is cool. Now let's go on to number 20. Here we are in the top 20. While this is still the B tier, these fights only get better from here on out. Starting with the Egg Salamander. In this fight, you play as both Supersonic and Burning Blaze, as they fight their respective Eggman. For the first phase, you build up your rings while avoiding the dreaded knockback lasers. And once you get near to him, things start to get a bit tricky around here. Eggman will fire projectiles that will encircle you, and you have to time your boosts perfectly! Or just deflect the green balls into him for easy damage. Once the first part is over, you switch over to Blaze, and she fires her projectiles. In Blaze's parts, you fire at Eggman Nega, and actually, this part is easier than Sonic's parts in my opinion, since you actually have to fire instead of waiting for a tricky projectile for you to deflect. While as Sonic, it can be quite tricky to attack Eggman, the rest of the fight is honestly really good. Also, Wrapped in Black is a pretty cool theme. Just listen. You go back to Sonic, and then you still have to deflect the projectiles back into him while also avoiding missiles that actually hurt you. Same thing for Blaze, except a claw-generated wormhole will actually hurt you. Overall, this fight has a lot going for it, especially for Sonic's first outing on the DS. But if you want that S rank, make Chaos protect you. And here we have the highest ranking Advanced Series boss in this list. Not like after beating the game as everybody while having all the Chaos Emeralds of Sonic, the game shows Vanilla taking a stroll in Leaf Forest until she gets sucked into Eggman's machine. Cream watches in horror and then cries, prompting Sonic to give chase. So the real fight takes place in space near Earth, since this is more or less a callback to Doomsday Zone. This boss shoots missiles that you have to deflect back to Eggman, but are significantly more difficult to anticipate because GBA's screen size is very small. And also, there is a vacuum that actually drains your rings. And a tail beam that actually freezes you! All of which are a pain to get out of. Later in the fight, he will use the fabled spin maneuver, making it harder for you to hit the missiles into Eggman. This fight has a nice sense of challenge and kinda left me on edge at times. And except for battle, I've actually beaten the Advanced Series on physical. Chaos Emeralds and all, honey. Chaos Emeralds and all. Also, the cutscene that plays after you defeat this boss has some of the craziest music ever made for a GBA game. I'm gonna quote Dashi and be like, seriously, who was in the studio cooking up this beat? Yeah, I think that this is the best final boss of the Advanced trilogy. Also, for the best Advanced game, in my opinion. At some point, I forgot to put this fight on the list, and it was from the very first game in the series. Like, how? How could you forget that? So, this fight takes place after Scrap Brain Act 3, and this consists of Robotnik using strategically placed pistons to crush Sonic, and you have to hit the one that Robotnik is actually in. And whether you hit it or not, you also have to dodge 4 energy balls that will instantly kill you since you don't have any rings. Yes, this fight is simple, but it's also pretty effective, and it also set the standard for future final bosses in the series. Both the good, the bad, and the X. Yes, this fight did inspire other fights in the series, and it's a nice way to end off the first game in the series. Nothing else to say about this one, I just think it's neat. Oh good, another writer's game, and this is the last one we'll talk about on this list. Master Core Abyss is without a doubt the best boss of the Writers Trilogy, since this is the only one that's actually enjoyable when compared to Grimace over here. This race takes place in the core of Babylon Garden, or the Mobius Strip as the game calls it. What you gotta do is keep your lead and save up your gravity points in order to hit the boss when he goes all that. And he uses a different attack depending on each lap that you're in. For example, in odd-numbered laps, he will use big rocks. And in even-numbered laps, he will use energy blasts, or energy blasts on the odd-numbered laps. or big rocks on the even numbered laps. Whichever ones, the attacks change throughout the laps. And unlike Babylon Guardian, you actually have to finish in first place. And in the story mode, you have to defeat it in 5 minutes. Which adds a sense of urgency to this fight because it summoned a black hole after bringing the 5 arcs of the cosmos to Babylon Guardian. And this boss's design is also a big step up from the previous game. Like, it actually looks really menacing. It reminds me of Metal Overlord, which we'll get to in a moment. I just think this fight is actually pretty cool and makes me wish for a new Riders game. Without, let's just say, unorthodox means of controlling your character. Oh nice, 3D Blast is on this list.
The Genesis version.
This fight is interesting since this has 5 phases. Finger lasers, flamethrowers, the hands, rockets, and the bouncy balls of doom! These attacks can be quite tricky to dodge because isometric area, but all you need is some patience. And for a final fight, this is quite diverse. And much like a majority of bosses in the series, you will need the Chaos Emeralds, but I think it lands here because of its unique allure to me. The dark setting and its unique design really captures the strangeness of this game. And also, there's a limited amount of rings, so you gotta save those up. Also, this fight is kinda hard, but not horrifically difficult. But I can see why people would have some trouble with this fight because isometric 3D space and the physics of a Formula 1 race car on steroids. From its strange setting, challenging faces, and really catchy music, this boss is quite the fight. There are just other fights that rank higher than this one. It's quite refreshing for me to talk about 3D Blast on this channel. It's not a bad game once you get used to the physics and the isometric 3D space. We get another case of Port Over Main, this time with Sonic Generations. Okay, this one will also be short because we're going to be tackling similar ground here, but there's going to be major differences between this one and the console version, so bear with me. For starters, this fight fixes the big issue I had with the console version. Sonic's friends are silent in this one because, dang, they would not shut up. And this also makes the fight way more engaging because it actually takes 8 hits rather than 3. His attacks in this version also prove to be more challenging with each phase. With classic Supersonic, you avoid his home. You guys again! And as modern Supersonic, you have to fly into the time meter as you avoid his attacks, which can be quite tricky to avoid. Also, this version of the fight is quite lengthy. Overall, while it is similar to the console version with a lot of its attacks, unlike Lost World, I actually do enjoy it. Overall, I just feel like this version of the fight is way more fulfilling. It's a shame that not a lot of people talk about this version of Generations. I'm gonna let nostalgia take the reins for this one, because this one is actually awesome. This fight takes place on
The Planet Core.
And much like its predecessor, you take control of Supersonic and Burning Blaze. But unlike Rush, you actually switch between them on the fly. This allows you to play either defensively with Sonic or going on the offensive with Blaze. These attacks come at you quite fast, so be careful to keep your rings up as well. Also, this music is basically just breakcore. Like, the whole internet was going crazy over breakcore. They weren't even noticing this one. Not only does this fight excel in the challenge sector, it also succeeds with cinematics, especially with this song. Okay, why does this song give me Sad AM vibes? If so, congratulations, you succeeded! From its unique challenge, strategic use of characters, and the perfectly chaotic theme for its music, this boss fight is a great way to end Sonic Rush Adventure. But alas, we have to move on to other fights. Okay, this one's a special case, so bear with me here, folks. I know that there is the Final Horizon version of this fight, but I consider them to be different since they're different fights. Also, the fanbase says that this scenario is just a simulation ran by Sage, so This fight is accessed by playing the game on hard or extreme mode, as doing this on easy or normal will just trigger a QTE. After you defeat Supreme, the End will escape into its moon form, and Sage will take control of Supreme and you fly into orbit along with Sage, with Eggman telling her,
Be careful, dear daughter.
in short, this fight is Toho, and I love it for that. Funny enough, I actually put this fight at number 4. Oh, how times change. Due to the Toho-esque nature of this fight, the attacks will come from each and every direction while you hold down the shoot buttons as you listen to the End monologuing. And this fight is quite lengthy, since this boss's HP goes down slow. Oh yeah, I'm with you. An absolute masterpiece of a final boss theme. Please give this one a listen. Back to the fight. These attacks are absolutely relentless, so stay alert at all times because attacks will come from everywhere. And once you manage to drag down the End's HP to next to nothing, it's QTE time. Thankfully, a far simpler one than Dark Gaia's. Then we transition to a cutscene of Sage giving the final blow to the End, as she says to him,
Please, look after Father.
Dang, we got some emotional fights here. Okay, I know this fight can be a bit rushed to people, but besides that, this fight is actually awesome. Okay, it's info dumping time. To preface, after you collect the world rings, you encounter Eraser again, and then he convinces Shara to give them to him, but then Sonic convinces her not to. Being unable to handle such a deep choice, she loses and it faints, prompting Eraser to start monologuing about the rings and the legend and all that and all blah blah blah. He ends it with trying to kill Sonic only for Shara to intervene and take the blow for him. Sonic and Shara say their last goodbyes, and then Eraser, with the power of the rings, goes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, transforming into this unholy abomination against nature. But then 3 rings get released from him and fly into him, turning him into Dark Spine Sonic. Okay, that's the lore done. On to the fight. This fight relies on motion control, so yeah. Be prepared for a lot of shaking. This fight takes place in a void, where you have to dodge his shots by tilting the Wii remote. As I said, motion controls are a thing in this fight, so get ready to shake a lot. While the motion controls are kind of a drawback for this fight, after you dodge the slashes, you have to shake the Wii remote in order to build up your soul gauge and ram into his giant spirit bomb. And guess what you gotta do next? You gotta shake! As the fight goes on, his attacks get faster and faster, so use the Wii remote to your advantage. Oh my god, bro, calm down! Calm down, bro! Despite the excessive amounts of shaking, this fight is actually awesome in my own opinion. Not only for the nostalgia I have with this fight, the emotional connections prior to the fight are also really good. Oh yes, and after you finally defeat him, Sonic just gives us the roast of the century right here.
Your tale is finished, Eraser. Next time, try writing a better story.
And not to be outdone just yet.
I told you, I'm not a rat. I'm a hedgehog.
For those asking where Mania's gonna be on this list, you're in luck. While I adore the heck out of Sonic Mania, I also think that the final boss is also quite the finale, and miles better than what we got in Superstars. This fight has you facing off against 2 bosses, both containing their own attacks. The Phantom King has ranged attacks in the form of energy balls that can actually damage Super Sonic, and the Kleptomobile has swinging arms that can knock you about, yet they don't deal any damage. Don't be fooled by these attacks though, they move really fast, so be on the lookout for them. And like a majority of these Supersonic fights, you have to maintain your rings. And unlike Superstars, picking up rings in this fight is a breeze rather than a hellish task. Yeah, the bosses actually do relay once you hit one of them, causing you to be on your toes, which is actually kind of awesome. Another cool detail in this fight is that the HUD, especially the timer, keeps glitching up because you're in a super screwy dimension. Oh my god! The music! Oh my god! T-Lopes is at another dimension! Overall, I just think this fight is actually incredible, and it's kind of a cool segue into Sonic Forces, for better or for worse. Here we are, the top 10, folks, which will also take us to the A ranks. Now, these fights are absolutely incredible. These are just the fights that I just simply think, wow, these are the best of the best. The only problem is, there are 3 fights in this list that exceed all of these. Starting with... Welcome to the Death Egg, suckers! I put this fight at number 10 for the simple reason of being iconic, and also really, really difficult. This fight is accessed after you manage to defeat Silver Sonic without getting hit, since much like the Egg Crusher, there aren't any rings. After that fight with Silver Sonic, you chase Robotnik into the Death Egg Robot, a boss bred for pain and pain alone. The main factor in this fight is timing, since jumping into him all willy-nilly will just kill you instantly. And you gotta hit him while he's walking at the right time. And if he rises up into the air, look for the reticle. I find it best to just head to either the left or right wall, and once it finally finishes flashing, spin dash out the way quickly. I know that this could turn off some people due to the sheer difficulty of the fight, but to me, the sheer difficulty makes this fight really iconic. And yet I find others that are better than this one. The music is also very intimidating. It serves a really good purpose, since this fight was heavily referenced in future Sonic games. Just goes to show that sometimes you just can't mess with the classics. At this point, saying that 06 is bad is like beating a dead horse. With that out of the way, let's fight God! For this fight, you control Super Sonic, Super Shadow, as well as the newly introduced Super Silver, as you use each hedgehog to take out a different part of his armor in the first phase. For Silver, you have to take out the first part of the armor, and then you have to use Shadow to take out the second part of the armor, and then use Sonic to take out the last part of the armor. And you have to do this while maintaining your ring counter, which can be rectified by switching hedgehogs with the Y or the triangle button. This phase is actually really epic. And it's surprising to me that this is coming from Sonic 06! And after you finish off this first phase, Solaris will rise back up and shed his armor and spread his wings. Now we get an orchestrated remix of his world. That sounds godlike! And now, you can also use all your hedgehogs to go all out on Solaris, though you can easily take him down with only one. From its sick design, the great variety of attacks, the music, the atmosphere, this fight is actually awesome. And also, this is the best fight in Sonic 06. I'm actually kind of glad that this game ended on a high, even if the events for the game itself were erased from the timeline, but whatever. I still think this fight's pretty cool. Hot take? Excalibur Sonic is the best transformation in the series, even if it's literal plot armor. We're going back to Nostalgia Town for this one because Dark Queen is one awesome fight from a highly underrated game. For this fight, you take control of the aforementioned Excalibur Sonic. This takes place after Merlina decides that she wants Camelot to last forever. But Sonic is actually against that, since he is more of a live-in-the-moment kind of guy, as he says so himself.
What is a world that goes on forever? That sounds pretty lame.
Another reason as to why this fight is in the top 10 is because of Merlina herself. In the beginning of the game, she holds a flower and asks, why is the beauty of this flower temporary? And why does it wither? And then she keeps that flower and uses it against Sonic to beat the ever-living crap out of him. And her facing off against Sonic really shows the great writing of this game, which is something I don't get to talk about very often. And Sonic's character really shines through in this fight because even if he won't stick around, he just wants to do the right thing. Anyways, on to the fight. Motion controls strike again for this one, but unlike secret rings, they're actually quite useful. Even if they're a little finicky at times, but not by much. All you gotta do is dodge Merlina's attacks, break her shield with your sword, counterattack her slashes to build up your soul gauge, and then go to town on her. This fight can be kind of short if you do know how to use your soul gauge properly, but the build up to the fight, the story surrounding it, and as well as with me, the music for this boss fight, make up for that big time. because this song was actually written from Merlina's perspective. Oh my god, I can't stress enough how much I love that song. Just listen to it.
Every world will have its test. Don't blame for what I have become. You know, every world will come to end, and I'll create your final arrest.
It's that good. It's that good. And oh, and after you finally beat her, you get to hear one of Sonic's deepest lines. Just listen.
Merlina, every world has its end. I know that's kind of sad, but that's why we gotta live life to the fullest in the time we have. At least, that's what I figure.
This is Sonic's character at his peak right there. On to number 7. Okay, now we get to fight Eggman at Disneyland in space! Okay, in my previous video for the footage of this boss, I used the Ultimate version, but I decided to switch to the OG version since it was better anyways. In this fight, you run down Egg Planet Park's massive elevator track and uses the Hyper Go-On power to power his attacks. And after that, you have to homing attack the hinges and then the cockpit, which will allow you to boost into the cockpit, releasing some wisps. Actually, Eggman uses negafied versions of the Spike, Cube, and Laser attacks, all of which I can dodge with ease. And if you manage to hit him enough times, the godly remix of Reach for the Stars commences! While this may be one of the easier fights, I cannot deny that I still love this fight for what it is. It also helped to inspire some other final bosses on this list, and take their attacks verbatim, for better or for worse. And if you manage to free all the wisps, prepare yourselves for the final Color Blaster, which isn't really impressive, but it's epic nonetheless. From the atmosphere, the design of the boss, the wonderfully orchestrated remix of Reach for the Stars, this fight is one of the Sonic series' best final fights, and for good reason. Also, listen to the Ultimate remix of the orchestrated remix of Reach for the Stars. It's actually really good. Here we have the first proper 3D final fight in the series. And boy, did this fight deliver. The next few fights on this list were really difficult to choose an entry for them since they were all really good final bosses. But I had to put Perfect Chaos at number 6, not because he's a bad boss, but because Sonic Adventure's presentation aged like milk.
Despite being considered groundbreaking at the time, but shh.
As Super Sonic, you fight Perfect Chaos on a destroyed Station Square, where you fly into him at full speed to attack the brain. This is easier said than done, especially on the second phase. We can't forget, we get introduced to Crush 40, and they was cooking with this one. Open Your Heart will forever be iconic, but the second phase is where things get a bit crazy. Not only will Perfect Chaos shoot tornadoes, but his freaking homing shots are more powerful and his attacks go faster now. Also, don't mind this little camera glitch. It just happens. Besides being kind of short, this fight is iconic. Not only being represented in later Sonic games, it also made an appearance in comics as well as Sonic X. With all the awesome out of the way, cue the guitar riff! Okay, that's enough. Let's go to number 5. Here we are in the top 5. And these fights only get better from here. Here we have the king of all Metal Sonic fights in the series. In this fight, you have to play as everybody. In phase 1, you play as Team Rose, which is the easiest phase, Team Chaotix, and then Team Dark. We'll cross the next phase when we get to it. For the first phase, all you have to do is use Team Rose's Team Blast to breeze through it. I guess there's nothing else to do with this one. But things get harder as the fight goes on, because in Team Chaotix's case, you gotta worry about Metal Sonic crystallizing your teammates. And if he crystallizes all of them, you lose. And if you see a red, blue, or yellow circle pulsating around Metal Sonic, it means you can only use a certain type of teammate to attack him, or a certain formation, whichever works. And with Team Dark, You also have to worry about your teammates being crystallized, but not quite as much since freaking Chaos Inferno, ba-boom! And after you manage to defeat Metal Madness, Metal Overlord will spread his wings and fly into the storm. This then prompts Team Sonic to use the power of the Chaos Emeralds to turn into Super Sonic and give Tails and Knuckles shields, despite the fact that they had super forms in the past. But that's besides the point. This is where the fight gets interesting, since regular attacks won't do a thing. Main thing you have to do is to find a way to fill up the Team Blast gauge, since it's the only way to damage him. What I also love from this fight is the sense of scale that this has. I know that it's just a thunderous sky, but that still has a great sense of scale to me. Also, Metal Overlord just looks awesome. I could see this guy in a Transformer show, or a game, or anything! And getting the S rank here is quite tricky since you have to beat this guy in 7 minutes. But the time you spend fighting Metal Madness carries over to this fight. Other than that, this fight is a great way to end Sonic Heroes. And I can't wait to see this guy in Shadow Generations when it launches this coming October. We're getting there, fellas. We're getting there. And to finish off the A ranks, we're going back to Sonic Unleashed. But this time, it's the one for Wii and PS2. As much as I love the HD version of Sonic Unleashed, I still think that Sonic Unleashed is still great for what it is. And its version of Dark Gaia is really the standout final boss compared to the former. For starters, it's shorter. It has less strict conditions compared to the HD version, and in this fight, you start off with a Punch-Out style fight. And this was a year before Next Level Games had their own shot at Punch-Out. This first phase is superior to the 360 version because you're actually the one dealing damage, rather than relying on QTEs to do work for you. Also, the second phase where you run to Dark Gaia's eyes combines all 3 of Sonic's segments rather than Colossus, Sonic, Nightmare Fuel, Super Sonic. Instead, you just go through those phases without much hassle, and those phases actually use the same exact layout as the 360 version, which is kind of rare for this case. Hit him in the eyes 3 times, Nightmare Fuel! And this Supersonic phase is more Supersonic focused, and that's what we want here. Not that the 360 version of this fight is bad, it's still a decent fight, but this version is just more fun to me. What you have to do is build up your boost meter in parts with rings, all while avoiding Dark Gaia slashes, which can take up the whole screen. Once you built up your boost, fly into the eyes and dodge rocks. Oh, and each flyby into the eyes gets trickier and trickier as the fight goes on. So remember to stay alert for those rocks. And remember to keep your rings up because while they may fall slowly, you still need to build up your rings to build up your boost meter. And once you take care of the eyes on the sides, the big center eye opens up and flying rocks come everywhere. Okay, I've had enough describing this fight. This fight actually is awesome. And Dark Gaia actually looks quite intimidating here. In fact, he looks just as good as the console version. Overall, this version of Dark Gaia is a lot more fun, even if it's from Sonic Unleashed. While not quite as good as Unleashed, it's still an incredible fight nonetheless. And it sits pretty at number 4. Can't believe we made it to the S ranks. Now these 3 bosses are what I consider to be the best of the best. The pinnacle of Sonic final bosses. I could swap these around depending on my mood, but the top 3 Sonic final bosses are... We know we had to put Sonic Adventure 2 on the S rank because it's Sonic Adventure 2, onto the Lizard Boy. In this fight, you control Super Sonic as well as Super Shadow in order to take down the Bio Lizard as he fused himself with the colony through unorthodox methods, to say the least. And all because General Robotnik went a bit cuckoo in the head for witnessing his grandchild getting capped. Okay, back to the fight. You have to fly into his foils in order to deal damage while avoiding orbs, lasers, and the homing blasts. You also have a 5-minute time limit to consider because the Ark is crashing into the Earth and whatnot. This actually adds some suspense to this fight. and Sonic's friends will tell you that. And once you manage to get a hit on him, you will switch to another hedgehog. And as the fight goes on, his attacks get more and more erratic. So you gotta be on your toes, my guys. Come on, buddy, don't forget about Live and Learn. That theme is awesome, amazing, masterpiece. Oh my god, it's amazing, it's so good.
Live and learn. True men never find your way.
It's Live and Learn. It's amazing. And also, depending on which hedgehog you finish the Bio-Lizard with, they will say different things. But in my case, I chose Shadow because it's poetic justice. We also witnessed the seeming demise of Shadow as Sega thought this would be the very last Sonic game, but due to Shadow's massive popularity, they decided to give him another chance in the sun due to Sega going third party, thus leading to the Year of Shadow. This fight is a pinnacle. This fight is amazing, incredible, the suspense, the presentation, the plot behind it. It's all so amazing, but I do need to talk about two other fights, so let's go ahead and move on to number 2. We're back to my favorite classic Sonic game, and this time, we're going to the Doomsday Zone. But once you get all the Chaos Emeralds, or Super Emeralds if you want to get the true ending, this fight is what defines a classic Sonic final boss. Not only does it combine an incredible atmosphere with its frenetic obstacles and music, but it also showcases the genius that this game has to offer. The genius in its simplicity, of course. In this fight, you try to maintain your rings as you reach Robotnik's final weapon. For this first phase, you have to trick the rockets he shoots to fly into him while avoiding his shots. But you have to fly at just the right spot to get a hit in. And you have to do this while maintaining your rings, which forces you to multitask. And after you trick enough rockets into his cockpit, you have to ram into him while avoiding some dummy-thick rockets. And each run-through into him gets more and more frenetic. And as your ring counter lowers, you have to act quickly. And then, just in the nick of time, you finally defeat him. This fight is just a pure genius in simplicity. This is an incredible example of a Sonic final boss. Nay, this is actually the best classic Sonic final boss in my own personal opinion. Also, the influence this fight had on the fanbase though. And as I mentioned from Mecha Sonic's fight, we got the Doomsday Zone music, which is one of the best boss themes in the series. Also, both this and Mecha Sonic have inspired the fanbase with projects like Super Mario Bros. Z, the Doomsday Zone animation, and this remix from the fan album Project Chaos by OC Remix. Just listen to this one, or just listen to the whole album. It's up to you. Okay, I know that putting a relatively recent final boss at the top spot will throw some of you off, but to me, the final Horizon version of the end is the best final boss in the Sonic series. And funny thing, this was going to be the original final boss, but was changed to a minigame because of time constraints. And I would like to thank Sega and Sonic Team for actually including this version of the fight in some capacity, because this fight is just absolutely amazing. Here's why. This is fought after you complete the absolute ordeal that is Master King's trial, which utilizes the perfect parry, as well as the fight with Supreme beforehand. But this time, rather than going to space, the end takes control of Supreme and causes it to grow extra arms. Now, where have we seen this before? For this fight, you gotta knock over a cable that endlessly feeds Supreme juice. But this can be a little bit confusing for some people because there isn't any indication as to using Quick Step in order to lock on to the cable, as this can endlessly heal itself. Well, this may be my only shred of a nitpick that I have. It's barely noticeable when refighting him, and this fight also makes use of the aforementioned perfect parry. which has different frames depending on the difficulty you set the game to, ranging from 1 second to 4 frames. After enough hits from its energy balls, Supersonic proceeds to transform into Supersonic 2, which allows him to actually deal damage to the end.
Now this is where shit gets real!
What I love about this fight is that it makes the player guess as to what to do next. But I know that this could be a downer for some, but to me, this is what makes this fight amazing. And we also can't forget about the cinematics of this fight. And once you manage to side-loop his gun out of his body and out of the ground, this is where shit gets absolutely insane. Oh, yes! 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 The remix! Yeah! And then Sage conjures a barrier to protect Eggman, but it's not enough for her, so the rest of Sonic's group help maintain the barriers in their glitchy states. And now you gotta fight this guy like normal, and okay, what the heck's he doing right now, bro? He's just using a spirit bomb. Okay, is this gonna kill me? Is this gonna kill me, bro? Is this gonna kill me, bro? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh, what? You can't do that! You don't do that! You don't do that, bro! Okay, looks like things are back to normal. Somehow. Good! Cinematics are so peak. I'm literally about to bust from how peak these are! Oh my god. Oh my god, bro. Oh my god, bro! Yes! Oh my god! Oh yes! Oh my gosh, bro! And once you finally drop his health down to 0, Eggman prompts Sonic to fly into the barrel of Supreme's rifle. Then Sonic proclaims that he's gonna go all out and DBZs himself to become Supersonic Cyber. Everything about this is perfection! Everything about this is so good! Oh my goodness! Yes! This is still incredible! Yo! Wow! That was raw! And now Eggman aims the gun up and... Look! Just witness this! Look! 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 This fight is just perfection, in my own opinion. Yours may differ, but this is the best final boss in the Sonic series. And all of this lands it at number 1. And 60 bosses later, we've made it to the end of this list. I've honestly had a lot of fun making this list, and it allowed me to beat a lot of Sonic games, as well as play a lot of Sonic games for the first time. And if you've made it to the end of this video, you're a champion. You're awesome. And I apologize for not being able to upload for the last couple of months. I'm sorry about that. As I said, I will get back to playing Sonic and the Black Knight and Sonic Unleashed. Preferably Sonic and the Black Knight, then Sonic Unleashed. So bear with me. So yeah, I love you guys. May God be with you. I will also be doing a Sonic X Shadow Generations live stream on this channel. The October, November, all of those things. Expect to see that in a moment. So yeah, I love you guys. May God be with you. Bye-bye. See you later. Peace. And have a good day.